Hi there. I want to go over all the different levels of Orton-Gillingham Academy membership because I know a lot of people typically have questions about how the Orton-Gillingham Academy works. So I thought we can go into a little discussion about it. So, just to give you some background on myself, I'm an Orton-Gillingham Academy Fellow, and I started my OG journey back in 2016. So, the purpose of the Orton-Gillingham Academy is basically to maintain the standards for practice for the OG approach. Members of the Academy can actually trace their roots all the way back to one of the founding fellows, like Anna Gillingham or Samuel Orton. The Academy is able to accredit instructional programs and clinics, and we hold conferences once a year and webinars, and it's truly the gold standard in Orton-Gillingham training. If you want to learn more about the Academy itself, please visit their website at ortonacademy.org. And this is the logo that you'll see, just to make sure that you're on the right page, because there are a lot of other organizations or companies that may use some elements of the OG approach, but they're often programs and they don't truly follow the diagnostic and prescriptive approach that the Academy really prides itself on. So it was started OG back about a century ago by Dr. Samuel Orton, and he was a neuropsychologist and pathologist. He wanted to find out why people struggled with reading. So he actually studied soldiers who died in World War One. He looked at their autopsies, examined their brains, and determined that it wasn't a result of brain damage that people couldn't read. It was just that their brains were wired differently. So he really studied their brains and pioneered the research in multisensory teaching. And that's where he called upon his friend Anna Gillingham, who was a teacher, a trainer, and a psychologist, to help develop this really unique approach. And she devoted her life to this, and so did her friend Bessie Stillman. They both wrote the Gillingham Manual, and they actually studied the dictionary and figured out that all words are comprised of syllable types and they can be divided by specific syllable division patterns. So basically, this approach was designed by a doctor and a teacher. To go over the different levels of certification, we can look at this flowchart. So when you're deciding which course to take, you need to determine what path you want to take. Do you want to start off with the classroom educator path, which basically ends here, or do you want to start with the associate path, which allows you to continue on? So you really need to decide from the get-go what pathway you want. Classroom educator level is really designed for classroom teachers who want to implement OG in a classroom or small group setting. Whereas the associate level is really for practitioners who are working with tier three level students or special educators or reading teachers. Typically people who are working with either students one-on-one or in a small group setting, okay? And you need to stay under the mentorship of a fellow. That basically means that the fellow that trained you at the associate level, you can feel free to always reach out to them, ask them any questions that you have. And then after the associate level, the former name of this is certified level, but they recently changed it and it's now called the clinical level. So the clinical level is for people who finished associate and want to continue on and learn a lot more advanced level skills and concepts, right? So if you're going to tutor one-on-one, especially privately, you really want to move on after associate to certified so you can have those more in-depth skills and learn a lot more knowledge about morphology and things like that. After the clinical or certified level, you can move on to become a fellow, and that's what I am. And basically that allows you to train others in the Orton-Gillingham Academy approach. So those are the different paths. So let's go over each one, separately. So I offer 35-hour classroom educator courses periodically. And those courses are basically for use in a group or classroom setting. And that's where you really learn about the OG approach, neurobiology of dyslexia, how the brain learns to read, structure of the English language, spelling rules, syllable types, all that good stuff. And it contains the basic knowledge for K to 2, Tier 1, Tier 2 instruction. These are some of the topics that we address in the classroom educator level. Typically, school districts will often train groups of teachers at the classroom educator level so that they learn how to apply the OGA principles in their classroom setting. And I really focused during this course on how to use what you already have. So if your school requires or mandates you to use certain programs, how can we take those programs and individualize them a lot more so that we can be more diagnostic and prescriptive practitioners, really analyze errors, and customize our lessons a little bit more to our small groups. So again, this is for classroom teachers or support staff. There is a practicum that you could continue on to do. Any OGA certification requires a practicum. The CE or Classroom Educator practicum is 50 hours and takes a minimum of 8 months. Basically, every 5 lessons, every 10 lessons, you would send an observation. So the OG fellow would observe about approximately 5 lessons and give you feedback on that. And typically that's for a small group of at least 2 or more. And once you completed the Classroom Educator course and practicum, you are certified at the Classroom Educator level. And I do offer CTLE certificates for anybody in New York State because I'm sponsored by New York State Education Department. So if you take any of my coursework, you could also get a CTLE certificate to count towards your professional development and your requirements. So now is the associate level course. And this really dives much deeper than the classroom educator one. I like to separate them into part 1 and part 2. So it's basically 56 synchronous or live hours on Zoom. Typically I do it. Sometimes I'll do private courses for districts and we'll do that in person. And then I do have about 14 asynchronous hours, which consists of like homework, quizzes, videos, articles. The purpose of this level is for teachers to really develop a deep understanding of phonology, orthography, advanced morphology, written expression, vocab, comprehension, and grammar. We go over different types of assessments, and we learn how to really develop a flexible sequence because there is no one Orton-Gillingham sequence. It's designed to be flexible and change based on your students. And then we also go over lesson planning strategies as well in this course. And these are some of the topics that we address. Okay, so it's similar to some of the topics in the Classroom Educator course, but we go a lot more in depth. Classroom Educator is more about group work, whereas associate level is geared more towards small group or one-on-one instruction, mainly. And this again is for Tier 3 teachers, special educators, or people who want to tutor privately. And you do need to have a bachelor's degree to get certified in the associate level. So again, to get any level of certification, you must do a practicum. There's a 100 lesson practicum and it's supervised. So basically minimum of 10 lessons would be observed by your fellow. Those observations consist of you sending me a video and a lesson plan. I will give you written feedback, and then we schedule a meeting over Zoom to go over your lesson, and it's truly a mentorship experience. The practicum should be a minimum of twice a week, 40 to 60 minutes, okay? There are some trainees that may require more than 10 observations, but 10 is the typical amount, okay? And we can incorporate some group work into the practicum if that fits your schedule better as well, or if you want more feedback on that. The practicum student does need to meet certain criteria, but they don't have to be formally tested. But they should demonstrate characteristics or red flags of a student with dyslexia. So weak phonological awareness, weak decoding, weak encoding, okay? And reading difficulty should be their primary issue. They shouldn't have any major comorbidities. The requirements for the associate level are pretty intense. You definitely need to commit to this. So first we have to find a student who is a classic dyslexic, who doesn't have major comorbidities, and it's up to the trainee to find that student. It's great if they have formal testing, but they don't have to have it. 100 lesson minimum, 8 months minimum. It should start quickly after your coursework so you don't forget what you learned. There are going to be those 10 observations with written and oral feedback from me. And then you're going to be required to write a profile on your student. So that's basically a 20-page document all about your student's learning profile, their testing, how you use that testing to really guide your instruction and what you did. Then you have to submit 3 lesson plans at the very end of your practicum. Not a video, just 3 lesson plans you would submit to the academy. There are also required readings. Once you do all that, then and you pass, you do so successfully, you would become certified at the associate level. It's really a lot of hard work. The great thing is I'm an accredited training fellow, so that means that I'm able to fast track your application. So typically when you apply through a fellow, you apply to the academy, and there are 3 deadlines throughout the year. So you would either submit your application typically in March, July, or November. And a committee reviews those applications, and about 3 months later, you hear back whether you passed or got deferred. If you're working with me, since I'm an accredited training fellow, I have that designation because a large number of my people pass their applications. That means I'm able to fast track yours, and I'm able to review your whole application, your whole student profile, and recommend you to the academy. And then usually you hear back in a week or 2, which is great, about whether you passed or not. So once you're accepted into the academy, you're considered certified at the associate level. After that, if you want to continue, then you can move on to the clinical level. And this is for people who finish their associate level. Associate level takes about 8 months to a year to complete fully, right? By the time you take your coursework, do your practicum. Then if you want to continue on and really deepen your knowledge base, you can take coursework at the clinical level. So I meant to actually change this here. It used to be called the certified level. Now it's called clinical level. All right. And this is to help all struggling readers of all ages, and especially more complex students. Okay. Takes 100 hours minimum of coursework and a 200 lesson practicum. So this is actually another 2 years of work, right? You only do this once you achieve associate level certification, right? And it really, really helps you to become more prepared to work with those complex students with complex learning profiles, also older students who have a lot more scattered skills, okay? And these are the practicum requirements. Again, 200 lessons over 2 years. Practicum is with 2 different students. One is usually at the lower level of language instruction, so real basic skills. Then you also work with a student at a higher level language instruction. So basically, by the time you submit your application, that student will hopefully be learning advanced prefixes, roots, things like that, more advanced morphology. Okay, and you would just submit an application at the end based on one of your students, and you have to do a profile, so you have to do a paper on that student, approximately 30 pages, and you have to submit 3 lesson plans. Okay, and this student for the clinical level must have a formal diagnosis, and there are 10 observations also. Okay, and then you would become certified at the clinical level. All right, and that means you can tutor on your own. So the main difference between the associate and clinical is the clinical is a higher level of expertise. Okay, and the associate level is really like a stepping stone to becoming a clinical level practitioner. The fellow level is intended for people who have completed everything, associate, clinical, and a fellow is able to provide training. Okay, so to become certified at the fellow level, it takes a minimum of 6.5 years, right? And that qualifies me to train others. And this is the highest level of training through the Orton-Gillingham Academy. This is a graphic that I made when I became a fellow. It was obviously very exciting because it really took a lot of work. Huge application. You have to write a course or multiple courses. You have to do a practicum. You have to supervise trainees, all of that fun stuff. And again, the only way to achieve any level of certification through the OGA is by doing the practicum and becoming accepted. So just to understand the time frame, again, just as an overview, classroom educator course is a 30-hour course, 50 lesson practicum. Associate coursework is 70 hours, 100 lesson practicum. Clinical coursework is another 100 hours on top of that 70, 200 lesson practicum. And then fellow is 90 hours of coursework and a 300-hour practicum. Okay? And you basically just have to decide what's right for you. Okay. You could always check my website if you want to learn about any upcoming trainings that I have. It's kimtheogteacher.com/register. And that's where I have all of my trainings listed. Okay. And I sometimes have some asynchronous work like workshops, but you cannot get any OGA certification by only taking asynchronous. It has to also be live as well. Okay. Thank you so much.